Good afternoon. Welcome to the Ask Kristy show. If this is your first time listening to the show, let me tell you a little bit about what we do on this show. First and foremost, this is an interactive show, and anybody that would like to call in and ask questions, I want to give you that call number right away. The number is 888-565-1470. And we really encourage you to call in. This show is on relationships. I'm Kristy Summers, and I've been doing this show for about 4 weeks. It meets every Friday from 2 to 3. And each week I have a different subject on relationships. And we have a special guest today who's somebody, wow, she's very special to me. She's somebody who's made the journey from coming and getting help in her life when she was lost in her relationships, when she was having a very difficult time meeting that right person, that special person, or having anything that's fulfilling in her life, and had pretty much come to a point to where she didn't even know if that was capable of ever happening to her. And anybody out there that's listening, I hope that my show, and the whole intent of my show, is to bring help to people out there who have had a string of unhealthy relationships or a life of just unfulfillment, and finding that special person and knowing that there are ways, that there is help, that there is a journey, and that there is a path that you can do to get yourself to a point where you can have that kind of like live happily ever after. I talked last week about the book that I'm writing, and I'm writing a book on dying to leave. And the book is about being in a relationship where you're basically dying because it's so unhealthy and you're so unhappy. And the journey that I do as a psychotherapist, and if you're just listening, I'm a psychotherapist. I practice in Miami, Florida. And what I do is I help people end those unhealthy relationships, and that's pretty much what my book is about. But I go further than that. I take you to a place to where you go through a period called withdrawal, where you're all by yourself, where you let go of all your loose ends, and the only thing that you have left is you, and it's a really difficult part in therapy. And then I help people go back into your family of origin, and I have you see where you learned all those unhealthy behaviors and all those things that keep you from fulfillment. It's kind of like we walk around in our lives unconscious. You know, we think that our conscious self is making our choices about the men we meet or the women we meet, but really, in fact, it's the things from our past that are making those choices. And if you don't work through or break through those unhealthy bonds, you'll never really be free to have a healthy relationship in the guest, and that's what my book is about. And towards the end of the book, and I think I talked about it last week, I talked about healthy dating and, you know, and how you go through those periods and dealing with rejection and all the difficult things that we have to face going out there as single people. And the guest that I have today is somebody who actually went through therapy with me about 8 or 9 years ago, and is going to be in the last chapter of my book, which is going to be Happily Ever After. And she is somebody who's worked through all of this stuff and is very happily married, and she's going to share with us today some of her journey and what's happened to her and how she got to be to the place that she is now. Hi, welcome back to the Ask Kristy show. I'm going to give you the number one more time. This is a call-in show. If any of you out there that are listening have any questions about relationships of any type, please call in. The number is 888-565-1470. Today's topic, I have a special guest speaker today. Her name is Rosie. I'm going to introduce her in a minute. And she is somebody that came to me as a client over 10 years ago, and has worked on her relationship issues and her family issues. And, you know, I think that she came into therapy to learn how to have healthier relationships with other people, and as a result of that, she has gotten so much more. And I'm going to introduce her to you, and we're going to talk a little bit about what her journey was like, where her life ended up, where it started at, where it ended up. And, you know, my hope is to everybody out there that's listening that you too, okay, if you follow some of the methods and the techniques and the path that we'll be talking about today, and that I talk about each week on this station, that you too can get to that place, and that it is possible to live happily ever after. And I'd like to introduce you to Rosie. And Rosie, it's great to have you on the show today.
It's great to be here, Kristy. Thank you for inviting me to be with you, and it's really an honor to spend this time with you.
Awesome, and I'm glad to have you too. And let's just start, Rosie. I'm going to ask you, the most typical question. What brought you to counseling? What was happening in your life that you felt you needed some help with?
Well, I started seeking out counseling after I started out in 12-step programs. I was a recovering food addict and relationship addict, as I later came to find out. And my journey in the 12 steps really led me to crack myself open a little bit and start looking inside at the things that were eating away at me. Mm-hmm. And that's what led me to therapy.
That's interesting that you said the things that are eating away at you, because there's a book, and because a lot of people think about food, they think it's about the food you're eating. And I think the name of the book is It's Not What You're Eating, It's What's Eating You. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And I know that food addiction and intimacy go hand in hand. Absolutely. I mean, a lot of times people that overeat, and have eating disorders are almost a way to, cover up themselves so that their heart is not exposed, so that people will actually not be attracted to them or not wanted to get close to them. That's like their armor. Do you relate to that, and did the 12-step program show you that?
I absolutely relate to it. I felt like for years food was comfort for me, especially when I was a child. I spent a lot of time by myself at home. Both of my parents worked. They never got along. They had a silent treatment going on between them for a very long time. And I would come home from school, and the thing that I looked forward to the most was what was in the refrigerator.
Absolutely. Do you mind sharing with us a little bit, because we all know that the dynamics of our family and that environment that we grew up in have so much to do with how we end up as adults and the choices we make. What was your father like? What was your mother like? And how did they affect you?
My mom and dad, I'm the youngest of 4 children. And really quite the baby. The next one after me is 10 years older than me. And so I spent most of the most difficult years of my parents' marriage alone with them. I became my mother's confidant, and that was an awkward place for me to be. And I later found out in therapy that was part of the big picture of why I had so many difficulties in life and relationships with food addictions and relationship addictions, etc. I don't fault them. They were doing the best they could for me at the time, and they were going through their own inner battle in their own relationship. My father had some issues with drinking, and my mother had some big issues with that. She had some control issues that I think she might have picked up from her own mother. And as I've said to you in the past, through our therapeutic processes, I really don't think that dysfunction just comes from your parents. It comes from a long line, generational dysfunction that we pass on to our children, and so on and so on.
And what you just said was so interesting about your mother and being your mother's confidant, and I want to bring that up in terms of relationship addiction, and that's called emotional incest, when a parent puts a child in the role of being the adult and telling the child adult information. For instance, your dad's drinking so much, and what am I going to do, and I'm so worried, that sets that child up to later on in their life seek out relationships with people who they're going to want to take care of them because they were set up as a caretaker as a child. Is that true in your life and later relationships?
That was very true. I remember being 8 years old and sitting with my mom and telling her, I think that you should be getting divorced, Mom, and that's a conversation for an adult, not for an 8-year-old.
Absolutely, absolutely. And later in life, what about men you met?
Later in life, I found myself choosing either, the dangerous kind of men that I thought I could be distracted by, but the long-term relationships that I found myself in, especially I was in a marriage of almost 15 years, with a very, very sweet man, but, with a lot of emotional and addictive behaviors.
What was it like being in a relationship with somebody? Was it that you took care of? Was it similar to, you mentioned that your father had a drinking problem, and you saw your mom in your life probably trying to control your father and his drinking and so on. Did you find yourself maybe later experiencing the same feelings as your mother, even though being angry because the last thing that you wanted to do was be like your mother?